What's up, you guys? Sean Ross Sapp, managing editor, Fightful.com, FightfulWrestling.com, FightfulMMA.com, FightfulBoxing.com. We have them all. Fightful.com is where you get it all. You know how to divide them up and get them individually. FightfulMMA.com is probably one of the biggest stories of the year. At least top five, I would say. Jon Jones handed down a 15-month suspension by an arbitrator, will be eligible to return at the end of October. There is a lot to unpack here and not a lot of time to unpack it. Jon Jones will be eligible to fight at Madison Square Garden. There's a lot to this. To be honest with you, I think it's an unusual situation, but there are people smarter than me. I highly encourage you all to follow Ian Kidd on Twitter. I'm going to get some of this information directly from his Twitter, so all credit to him here. He is the best person to follow about this type of stuff. Jon Jones was handed down a 15-month suspension so his case went to arbitration in his battle against USADA, essentially. This was his second offense. The first offense, he was said to have unknowingly ingested a supplement. He basically took a gas station dick pill that somebody gave to him. And it was said that it was without malice, but it was also careless, so he was still suspended. This arbitrator said that Jon Jones also didn't knowingly cheat when he failed last July for a steroid metabolite, turinabol. But there's some more into it. Apparently, Jon Jones provided assistance to, and the arbitrator, according to Ian Kidd, was Richard McLaren, that provided him a 30-month reduction. 30-month reduction. Think about that. That's 66% of your suspension. Gone. And as Ian Kidd notes on Twitter, it might be to his knowledge, the first time any UFC fighter has chosen to avail themselves of Section 101 or 10.6.1 and turn state's evidence to reduce their suspension. I think he's on Severe MMA's Patreon talking about this, so I encourage you all to check that out as well. But basically, if you've had anything to do with Jon Jones or your Jon Jones Connect or anything of that nature, you should probably be watching out. Also, it's stated that Jon Jones was doing cocaine before and after he tested for turinabol and went into rehab shortly after that. So really, he's learned nothing. DUI, wreck, nothing. Failing the first cocaine test, nothing. The first steroid test, nothing. Hit and run, nothing. Second test, nothing. My God. And from a viewer aspect, am I excited to see the guy fight again? Of course. He's one of the greats of all time in the cage, but this is a very, very unusual situation. And basically, he got this because he snitched. He told. And he's well within his rights to do so. Otherwise, he was looking at over 3 more years out of the cage. Does he want that? Well, if he came back at 33, I'm sure he's still pretty well ahead of a lot of the heavyweights. But here he is back in the cage, probably at Madison Square Garden. We'll speculate that in a minute. But he's still younger than a lot of the light heavyweights and the heavyweights. And as wild as it is, here's the crazy thing. If he fights this year, through all that Jon Jones has been through, everything, there won't have been a year, like a calendar year, that he hasn't fought. Because he fought July 29th, 2017. It was overturned. April 2016, which was before his drug test. January of 2015, which was before his hit and run. April 2014, which was before his first cocaine test failure. But now he's missing like 14, 16 months between a fight. I mean, he's already considered one of the greats of all time. And some people with a giant asterisk, whether it's known that he took this stuff unwillingly or willingly or whatever the case may be, there's still an asterisk next to him due to all the controversies out of the cage. And that's always what it is. I mean, inside the cage, how can you deny the guy? One of the, probably the greatest resume of all time. He beat Chael Sonnen with his toe sticking out and pointing that way. It was unbelievable. Had he not finished that fight when he did, I mean, had that fight went 27 seconds more, Jon Jones might have lost the title in between rounds. So here's the thing. At the end of during UFC 228, rather, you saw Joe Rogan and Daniel Cormier kind of like giggling a little bit about, oh, I've got some ideas what the UFC 230 main event could be, even though it's not announced. How often does UFC not announce a main event for any show, much less one that caliber, until 6-7 weeks ahead? Or, I mean, it's, 6-7 weeks ahead. Never. They never do that. So Rogan said that he knew some things that, and this has been like one of the worst kept secrets ever. USADA literally answered. Colby Covington said that USADA got paid off. Colby Covington, keep in mind, is he new era Chael Sonnen kind of dropping these scoops before they go? Because last week USADA had to drop some info and say, hey, listen, we don't take payoffs. It's not what we do. Apparently it's a payoff in the form of him snitching, but this accusation is always going to be there now. For better or for worse, people are going to accuse USADA of taking a buy-off or a payoff, whether they did it or not. Jon Jones is going to get a lot of the snitch comments, but if you want a clean sport, can you be mad about that? This is mind-boggling. He's eligible to return in 6 weeks. I can't wait to see how Daniel Cormier reacts to this, because on that UFC 228 broadcast, he seemed very excited about the prospect of what Joe Rogan knew. And if Joe Rogan knows, you better damn well believe that Daniel Cormier knows. Daniel Cormier is very plugged into that stuff. And if a guy like Jon Jones is coming back, you better damn well believe that Daniel Cormier is all over that. So Jones's 15-month suspension is retroactive to the date that the sample was collected, which was July 28, 2017, which is the day before his fight with Daniel Cormier. Now, this did stand out from the beginning because, to be honest with you, if you know a drug test is coming and you know that drug test is coming on after the weigh-ins, which is when this was collected, why would you have any of this in your system if you were a cheat? Almost nobody these days is getting popped for post-fight, pre-fight tests. It's usually out of competition samples. Cormier, on the other hand, has said, because I got a lot of people saying he could fight Lesnar and Jones. He could. I would fight them both at heavyweight, honestly. I'd get rid of that light heavyweight title and say, Jones, if you want me, come to heavyweight. Get 2 more paydays out of it. He says he's going to retire in March. He had to have surgery, so we'll see how that goes. Shout-outs to our friends Pro Wrestling Unlimited in the chat. But if you're DC seems past that. But how can he be, really? One of the greatest fighters of all time wasn't able to beat another one of the greatest fighters of all time, but the only situation is every time they seem to get ready to lock it up or they're locking it up, there's a drug test failure. Before their first fight, there was the out-of-competition one where he basically tested for street drugs, cocaine, and a lot of people say, well, why wasn't this his third offense? Because he tested positive for that before the first fight. Well, it's because, quite honestly, USADA and the athletic commissions are not vice cops. Marijuana and cocaine are not illegal out of competition, and that was considered out of competition. Should that be revised? Sure, probably. But they're not trying to suspend somebody for smoking weed 6 weeks out. That's not in the UFC or USADA or the athletic commission's interest. At least most of them. The ones that aren't weird. But you also have a UFC light heavyweight division, and who knows how long Jon Jones would hang around there, that has Alexander Gustafsson. Gustafsson, who has been curiously pulled from a series of fights. Volkan Ozdemir, Jan Blachowicz, Jimmy Manuwa, Corey Anderson. You have some people that Jones hasn't fought. Dom Reyes is one of the most promising ones. But really, it's heavyweight. That's where the money is, I think. Stipe, Curtis Blades, Francis Ngannou, Volkov, Overeem, JDS, all those guys that Jon Jones hasn't fought before. That's where the money is, in my estimation. Of course, this news drops the day after the Fightful MMA podcast, which you all can check out every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. I am joined by MMA insider James Lynch, who talks to dozens, if not hundreds, of UFC fighters and MMA fighters in general on a monthly basis. So he has a very, very plugged-in inside angle on things. And we're also joined by Showdown Joe Ferraro, who has covered MMA for over 2 decades. He is a licensed referee and judge, or certified referee and judge. So he has that aspect as well. Make sure you all check that out. We're on podcast platforms everywhere. Leave us a thumbs up on this video. If you all have any questions about this, hit me up in this live chat on YouTube. I am here for a little bit longer. We have some wrestling content going up shortly as well. Because, man, I mentioned this after All In. If you're not familiar with All In or pro wrestling in general, it's been a very busy since spring. You've had the Greatest Royal Rumble and WrestleMania, and you've had SummerSlam and NXT and All In and all that stuff. It was a pro wrestling heavy spring and summer. And when Nate Diaz came back, and you had Triple G Canelo, and you've got Conor McGregor coming back, and GSP looks like he's getting in shape again. It really seemed, and even some upcoming fights, Anthony Joshua's fighting. You've got a good Bellator show coming up, Musashi versus McDonald. It really seemed like combat sports were kind of bringing the attention back to them. And as Fightful.com, we cover that crossover combat sports and pro wrestling like no other. It really seemed like for a while pro wrestling was going to take that torch and carry it for a very long time. However, you've got all those people I mentioned. Nate Diaz is back. Conor McGregor is back, and he's fighting Khabib. Even to a lesser degree, Tony Ferguson back in the cage. You got Triple G and Canelo. That was a barn burner. Who knows where they're going next? You got Mayweather saying he wants to fight Pacquiao again. I mean, the first fight sucked, but Pacquiao was hurt. Maybe that can be big. You got Wilder and Fury coming up. You got Joshua fighting. You got that Bellator show coming up. The "you're all on drugs" line from Nate Diaz seems right. Yeah, man, it's kind of amazing. Back in the day, I used to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I really did. And as we've seen, you can't. You have to assume that almost everybody is on something. That's insane to think. And physique doesn't necessarily. I mean, look at Ben Rothwell. Ben Rothwell's been popped. And who would look at him and say, man, that guy's on some stuff? No. He looks like your neighbor. Like your neighbor might look tougher than Ben Rothwell. But here we are. Ben Rothwell's out of the cage for 2 years. Jon Jones, 15 months. Two offenses. 3 failed drug tests in total. As a DUI. As a hit and run. So the fight fan in me is very excited. The person who's got to cover this sport objectively, oh boy, I don't know. Now, yeah, assuming this is a previous, and it's all within the guidelines and stuff, and everything's hunky-dory, then okay, he again does reserve his right to snitch. I wonder who he snitched on, what he snitched about, how much compliance that he provided. I guess we're going to find out. Here's the funny thing. You may, if you've listened to this podcast any extended amount of time, then you know how there's a week every year, there's a week period. It surrounds Thanksgiving, either a week before or a week after. My God, that's Enlightenment week. Every week around there, some big interview drops. A couple years in a row, it was Jon Jones. One year, it was CM Punk. I think last year, it was Paige after all her scandals in WWE. There's always, like, around that period, there's always some big, enlightening interview where you hear about CM Punk just dishing everything on WWE. You hear about Jon Jones talking about his hit and run. You hear Jon Jones on the Rogan show talking about his drug test failures. You hear Paige talking about one of the most controversial things in recent wrestling memory. And I wonder if Jon Jones will be a 3-time recipient of the SRS Interview of Enlightenment Award from that week, because I'll be disappointed if one doesn't happen at this point. And if he fights in early November, that would put him about on schedule. You know, he'll take his time off. He'll spend his time with his family. Not like he hasn't been able to spend plenty of time with his family. But hey, maybe it'll be him again. Jon Jones has posted on Instagram. He says, quote, "It's difficult to express myself at this moment, but I can definitely say my heart is filled with gratitude and appreciation. I want to thank all of you who have stood by me during the toughest stretch of my life. It has meant the world to me and always will, but now's the time to shift the focus front and center to the road ahead. Greatness is what I'm chasing, and the path to reclaiming my throne is now officially open. Comeback season begins now." End quote. Man. So Dana White is going to be put on the spot. He says that Jon Jones will not headline MSG to Brett Okamoto. So, I mean, because that would stink to high heaven, right? If he got cleared a week before MSG, wouldn't that stink to high heaven? Because that's what everybody assumes. Can Dana White be trusted? No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. Dana White also said, quote, "The arbitrator found that Jones never intentionally or knowingly took steroids, and the result of the positive test was the result of a contaminated substance. The science completely supports that finding. The science doesn't lie, so I look forward to getting him back early next year." I would be surprised if he didn't fight on the year-end card. I would be very, very surprised. Guys, leave us a thumbs up on this video. Subscribe. This will go up on our podcast platforms as well. As Pro Wrestling Unlimited says, White says every time he won't headline with Jones, then he ends up headlining. That's true. FightfulMMA.com. Check us out, my friends. Maybe you have never tried FightfulMMA.com. Maybe you try the MMA Junkies, the MMA Fightings, the more established sites of the world. Give us a shot. Check out FightfulMMA.com. Click that exclusives tab and enjoy yourself, my friends. Thank you all so much. I'm here in street clothes, a T-shirt, for the love of God, that's just unleashing on us. And if you want to unleash on somebody, use BlueChew.com, code FIGHTFUL. Get your first shipment free. Until next time, we're out.